the Sacred Wild, and welcome to the book club. We are now reading the Celestine Prophecy, which I am super stoked. I've never read it before, and Jen's a huge fan, so Jen has a lot of good to say about it. So I'm excited to see where the conversations afterwards take us.
Awesome.
The way we usually do it is we'll just read for like 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to share on what we just read.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Laura, do you have the book with you?
I do.
Yay. Awesome. Okay. Beautiful. All right. Who wants to start it off?
I think I started last week, if I remember correctly.
Okay, I'll start it off because I'm so excited to read this book. Just a little preface. This is like, I read this book for the first time when I was 19, and it was like the grounding stone that was like, no, Jen, you're not crazy for thinking the way that you're thinking. The thoughts that are going in your head, other people are thinking too. You should not be sent into an insane asylum. So reading this, the way I describe it, it's like it was like reading my mind. It's like somebody took what was happening in my mind and put it in a freaking book, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. And so that it just really kind of was my launching pad to dive even deeper into, energy, into psychology, into energetics, into all of that. So, okay, I'm gonna stop fangirling right now. So, all right, we are gonna start page 1, and then the name of the chapter is A Critical Mass. I drove up to the restaurant and parked, then leaned back in my seat to think for a moment. Charlene, I knew, would already be inside, waiting to talk with me. But why? I hadn't heard a word from her in 6 years. Why would she have shown up now, just when I had sequestered myself in the woods for a week? I stepped out of the truck and walked toward the restaurants. Behind me, the last glow of a sunset sank in the west and cast highlights of golden amber across the wet parking lot. Everything had been drenched an hour earlier by a brief thunderstorm, and now the summer evening felt cool and renewed, and because of the fading light, almost surreal. A half moon hung overhead. As I walked, old images of Charlene filled my mind. Was she still beautiful, intense? How would time have changed her? And what was I to think of this manuscript she had mentioned? This ancient artifact found in South America that she couldn't wait to tell me about. I have a 2-hour layover at the airport, she had said on the telephone. Can you meet me for dinner? You're going to love what this manuscript says. It's just your kind of mystery. My kind of mystery? What did she mean by that? Inside, the restaurant was crowded. Several couples waited for tables. When I found the hostess, she told me Charlene had already been seated and directed me toward a terraced area above the main dining room. I walked up the steps and became aware of a crowd of people surrounding one of the tables. The crowd included 2 policemen. Suddenly, the policeman turned and rushed past me and down the steps. As the rest of the people dispersed, I could see past them to the person who seemed to have been the center of attention, a woman still seated at the table, Charlene. I quickly walked up to her. Charlene, what's going on? Is anything wrong? She tossed her head back in mock exasperation and stood up, flashing her famous smile. I noticed that her hair was perhaps different, but her face was exactly as I remembered. Small, delicate features, wide mouth, huge blue eyes. You wouldn't believe it, she said, pulling me into a friendly hug. I went to the restroom a few minutes ago, and while I was gone, someone stole my briefcase. What was in it? Nothing of importance, just some magazines, books I was taking along for the trip. It's crazy. The people at the other tables told me someone just walked in, picked it up, and walked out. They gave the police a description, and the officer said they would search the area. Maybe I should help them look. No, let's forget about it. I don't have much time, and I want to talk with you. I nodded, and Charlene suggested we sit down. A waiter approached, so we looked over the menu and gave him our order. Afterward, we spent 10 or 15 minutes chatting in general. I tried to underplay my self-imposed isolation, but Charlene picked up on my vagueness. She leaned over and gave me that smile again. So what's really going on with you? She asked. I looked at her eyes, at the intense way she was looking at me. You want the whole story immediately, don't you? Always, she said. Well, the truth is, I'm taking some time for myself right now and staying at the lake. I've been working hard and I'm thinking about changing directions in my life. I remember you talking about the lake. I thought you and your sister had to sell it. Not yet, but the problem is property taxes. Because the land is so close to the city, the taxes keep increasing. She nodded. So what are you going to do next? I don't know. Something different? She gave me an intriguing look. Sounds as if you're as restless as everyone else. I suppose, I said. Why do you ask? It's in the manuscript. There was a silence as I returned her gaze. Tell me about this manuscript, I said. She leaned back in her chair as if to gather her thoughts, then looked me in the eye again. I mentioned on the phone, I think, that I left the newspaper several years ago and joined a research firm that investigates cultural and demographic changes for the UN. My last assignment was in Peru. While I was there completing some research at the University of Lima, I kept hearing rumors about an old manuscript that had been discovered. Only no one could give me any of the details, not even at the departments of archaeology or anthropology. And when I contacted the government about it, they denied any knowledge whatsoever. One person told me that the government was actually working to suppress this document for some reason, although, again, he had no direct knowledge. You know me, she continued, I'm curious. When my assignment was over, I decided to stay around for a couple of days to see what I could find out. At first, every lead I pursued turned out to be another dead end. But then, while I was eating lunch in a cafe outside of Lima, I noticed a priest watching me. After a few minutes, he walked over and admitted that he had heard me inquiring about the manuscript earlier in the day. He wouldn't reveal his name, but he agreed to answer all my questions. She hesitated for a moment, still looking at me intensely. He said the manuscript dates back to about 600 BC. It predicts a massive transformation in human society. Beginning when? I asked. In the last decades of the 20th century. Now? Yes, now. What kind of transformation is it supposed to be? I asked. She looked embarrassed for a moment, then with force said, the priest told me it's a kind of renaissance in consciousness, occurring very slowly. It's not religious in nature, but it is spiritual. We're discovering something about human life on this planet, about what our existence means, and according to the priest, this knowledge will alter human culture dramatically. She paused again, then added, the priest told me the manuscript is divided into segments or chapters, each devoted to a particular insight into life. The manuscript predicts that in this time period, human beings will begin to grasp these insights sequentially, one insight, then another, as we move from where we are now to a completely spiritual culture on Earth. I shook my head and raised my eyebrows cynically. Do you really believe all this? Well, she said, I think. Look around, I interrupted, pointing at the crowd sitting in the room below us. This is the real world. Do you see anything changing out there? Just as I said that, an angry remark erupted from a table near the far wall, a remark I couldn't understand, but which was loud enough to hush the entire room. At first, I thought the disturbance was another robbery, but then I realized it was only an argument. A woman appearing to be in her 30s was standing up and staring indignantly at a man seated across from her. No, she yelled. The problem is that this relationship is not happening the way I wanted. Do you understand? It's not happening. She composed herself, tossed her napkin on the table, and walked out. Charlene and I stared at each other, shocked that the outburst had occurred at the very moment we were discussing the people below us. Finally, Charlene nodded toward the table where the man remained alone and said, it's the real world that's changing. How? I asked, still off balance. The transformation is beginning with the first insight. And according to the priest, this insight always surfaces unconsciously at first as a profound sense of restlessness. Restlessness? Yes. What are we looking for? That's just it. At first, we aren't sure. According to the manuscript, we're beginning to glimpse an alternative kind of experience, moments in our lives that feel different somehow, more intense and inspiring. But we don't know what this experience is or how to make it last. And when it ends, we're left feeling dissatisfied and restless with a life that seems ordinary again. You think this restlessness was behind the woman's anger? Yes. She's just like the rest of us. We're all looking for more fulfillment in our lives, and we won't put up with anything that seems to bring us down. This restless searching is what's behind the me first attitude that has characterized recent decades. And it's affecting everyone from Wall Street to street gangs. She looked directly at me. And when it comes to relationships, we're so demanding that we're making them near impossible. Her remark brought me back to the memory of my last two relationships. Both had begun intensely and both within a year had failed. When I focused on Charlene again, she was waiting patiently. What exactly are we doing to our romantic relationships? I asked. I talked with the priest a long time about this, she replied. He said that when both partners in a relationship are overly demanding, when each expects the other to live in his or her world, to always be there to join in his or her chosen activities, an ego battle inevitably develops. What she said struck home. My last two relationships had indeed degenerated into power struggles. In both situations, we had found ourselves in a conflict of agendas. The pace had been too fast. We had too little time to coordinate our different ideas about what to do, where to go, what interests to pursue. In the end, the issue of who would lead, who would lead, who would determine the direction for the day, who had become an irresolvable difficulty. Because of this control battle, Charlene continued, the manuscript says we will find it very difficult to stay with the same person for any length of time. That doesn't seem very spiritual, I said. That's exactly what I told the priest, she replied. He said to remember that while most of society's recent ills can be traced to this restlessness and searching, this problem is temporary and will come to an end. We're finally becoming conscious of what we're actually looking for, of what this other, more fulfilling experience really is. When we grasp it fully, we'll have attained the first insight. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'll go next.
All right.
Our dinner arrived, so we paused for several minutes as the waiter poured more wine and to taste each other's food. When she reached across the table to take a bite of salmon from my plate, Charlene wrinkled her nose and giggled. I realized how easy it was to be with her. Okay, I said, what is the experience we're looking for? What is the first insight? She hesitated as though unsure how to begin. This is hard to explain, she said, but the priest put it this way. He said the first insight occurs when we become conscious of the coincidences in our lives. She leaned toward me. Have you ever had a hunch or intuition concerning something you wanted to do, some course you wanted to take in your life, and wondered how long it might happen? And then after you had forgotten about it and focused on other things, you suddenly met someone or read something or went somewhere that led to the very opportunity you envisioned. Well, she continued, according to the priest, these coincidences are happening more and more frequently, and that when they do, they strike us as beyond what would be expected by pure chance. They feel destined, as though our lives had been guided by some unexplained force. The experience induces a feeling of mystery and excitement. As a result, we feel more alive. The priest told me that this is the experience that we've glimpsed and that we're now trying to manifest all the time. More people every day are convinced that this mysterious movement is real and that it means that something else is going on beneath everyday life. This awareness is the first insight. She looked at me expectantly, but I said nothing. Don't you see? She asked. The first insight is a reconsideration of the inherent mystery that surrounds our individual lives on this planet. We're experiencing these mysterious coincidences, and even though we don't understand them yet, we know they are real. We are sensing again, as in childhood, that there is another side of life that we have yet to discover, some other process of operating behind the scenes. Charlene was leaning further toward me, gesturing with her hands as she spoke. You're really into this, aren't you? I asked. I can remember a time, she said sternly, when you talked about these kinds of experiences. Her comment jolted me. She was right. There had been a period in my life when I had indeed experienced such coincidences and had even tried to understand them psychologically. Somewhere along the way, my view had changed. I had begun to regard such perceptions as immature and unrealistic for some reason, and I had stopped even noticing. I looked directly at Charlene, then said defensively, I was probably reading Eastern philosophy or Christian mysticism at that time. That's what you remember. Anyway, what you're calling the first insight has been written about many times, Charlene. What's different now? How is a perception of mysterious occurrences going to lead to a cultural transformation? Charlene looked back down at the table for an instant and then back at me. Don't misunderstand, she said. Certainly this consciousness has been experienced and described before. In fact, the priest made a point to say that the first insight wasn't new. He said individuals have been aware of these unexplained coincidences throughout history, that this had been the perception behind many great attempts at philosophy and religion, but the difference now lies in the numbers. According to the priest, the transformation is occurring now because of the number of individuals having this awareness all at the same time. What did he mean exactly? I asked. He told me the manuscript says the number of people who are conscious of such coincidences would begin to grow dramatically in the 6th decade of the 20th century. He said that this growth would continue until sometime near the beginning of the following century, when we would reach a specific level of such individuals, a level I think of as a critical mass. The manuscript predicts, she went on, that once we reach this critical mass, the entire culture will begin to take these coincidental experiences seriously. We'll wonder in mass what mysterious process underlies human life on this planet. And it'll be this question asked at the same time by enough people that will allow the other insights to also come into consciousness. Because according to the manuscript, when a sufficient number of individuals seriously question what's going on in life, we'll begin to find out. The other insights will be revealed one after the other. I'll pass.
Thank you. She paused to take a bite of food. And when we grasped the other insights, I asked, then the culture will shift? That's what the priest told me, she said. I looked at her for a moment, contemplating the idea of a critical mass, then said, you know, all this sounds awfully sophisticated for a manuscript written in 600 BC. I know, she replied. I raised the question myself. But the priest assured me that the scholars who first translated the manuscript were absolutely convinced of its authenticity, mainly because it was written in Aramaic, the same language in which most of the Old Testament was written. Aramaic in South America? How did it get there in 600 BC? The priest didn't know. Does his church support the manuscript? I asked. No, she said. He told me that most of the clergy were bitterly trying to suppress the manuscript. That's why he couldn't tell me his name. Apparently, talking about it was very dangerous for him. Did he say why most church officials were fighting against it? Yes, because it challenges the completeness of their religion. How? I don't know exactly. He didn't discuss it much, but apparently the other insights extend some of the church's traditional ideas in a way that alarms the church elders, who think things are fine the way they are. I see. The priest did say, Charlene went on, that he didn't think the manuscript undermines any of the church's principles. If anything, it clarifies exactly what it meant by these spiritual truths. He felt strongly that the church leaders would see this fact if they would try to see life as a mystery again and then proceed through the other insights. Did he tell you how many insights there were? No, but he did mention the second insight. He told me it is more correct interpretation of recent history, one that further clarifies the transformation. Did he elaborate on that? No, he didn't have time. He said he had to leave and take care of some business. We agreed to meet back at his house this afternoon, but when I arrived, he wasn't there. I waited 3 hours and still he didn't show up. Finally, I had to leave to catch my flight home. You mean you weren't able to talk with him anymore? That's right. I never saw him again. And you never received any confirmation about the manuscript from the government? None. And how long did this take place? And how long ago did this take place? About a month and a half. For several minutes, we ate in silence. Finally, Shirlene looked up and asked, "So what do you think?" "I don't know," I said. Part of me remained skeptical at the idea that human beings could really change. But another part of me was amazed to think that a manuscript which spoke in these terms might actually exist. "Did he show you a copy or anything?" I asked. "No, all I have is my notes." Again, we were silent. "You know," she said, "I thought you would be really excited by these ideas." I looked at her. "I guess I need some proof that what this manuscript says is true." She smiled broadly again. "What?" I asked. That's exactly what I said, too." "To whom? The priest?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "He said that the experience is the evidence." "What did he mean by that?" "He meant that our experience validates what the manuscript says. When we truly reflect on how we feel inside, on how our lives are proceeding at this point in history, we can see that the ideas of the manuscript to make sense, that they ring true." She hesitated. "Does it make sense to you?" I thought for a moment. Does it make sense? Is everyone restless or is everyone as restless as me? And if so, does our restlessness result from a simple insight? The simple awareness built up for 30 years? That there is really more to life than we know, more that we can experience? "I'm not sure," I finally said. "I guess I need some time to think about it. Think about it. I walked out to the garden beside the restaurant and stood behind the cedar bench facing the fountain. To my right, I could see the pulsing lights of the airport and hear the roaring engines of a jet ready for takeoff. "What beautiful flowers," Charlene said from behind me. I turned to see her walking toward me along the walkway, admiring the row of petunias and begonias which bordered the sitting area. She stood beside me and I put my arm around her. Memories flooded my mind. Years ago, we had both lived in Charlottesville, Virginia. We had spent regular evenings together talking. Most of our discussions were about academic theories and psychological growth. We had both been fascinated by the conversations and by each other. Yet it struck me how platonic our relationship had always been. "I can't tell you," she said, "how nice it is to see you again." "I know," I replied. "Seeing you brings back a lot of memories." "I wonder why we didn't stay in touch," she asked. Her question took me back again. I recalled the last time I had seen Charlene. She was telling me goodbye at my car. At the time, I felt full of new ideas and was departing for my new hometown to work with severely abused children. I thought I knew how such children could transcend the intense reactions the obsessive acting out that kept them from going on with their lives. But as time had progressed, my approach had failed. I had to admit my ignorance. How humans might liberate themselves from their past was still an enigma to me. Looking back over the previous 6 years, I now felt sure the experience had been worthwhile. Yet I also felt the urge to move on. But to where? To do what? I had thought of Charlene only a few times since she helped me crystallize my ideas about childhood trauma. And now, here she was again, back in my life. And our conversation felt just as exciting as before. I guess I got totally absorbed in my work, I said. So did I, she replied. At the paper, it was one story after another. I didn't have time to look up. I forgot about everything else. I squeezed her shoulder. You know, Charlene, I had forgotten how well we talked together. Our conversation seemed so easy and spontaneous. Her eyes and smile confirmed my perception. I know, she said. Conversations with you give me so much energy. I was about to make another comment when Charlene started past me toward the entrance to the restaurant. Her face grew anxious and pale. What was wrong? I asked, turning to look the direction. Several people were walking toward the parking lot, talking casually, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I turned to face Charlene again. She still appeared alarmed and confused. What is it? I repeated. Over by the first row of cars, do you see the man in the gray shirt? I looked toward the parking lot again. Another group was exiting through the door. What man? I guess he's not there now, she said, straining to see. She looked directly into my eyes. When the people at the other tables described a man who stole my briefcase, they said he had thinning hair and a beard and wore a gray shirt. I think I just saw him over there by the cars watching us. A knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. I told Charlene I would be right back, and I walked to the parking lot to look around. Careful not to get too far away. I saw no one who fits the description. When I returned to the bench, Charlene took a step closer to me and said softly, you suppose this person thinks I have a copy of the manuscript? And that's why he took my briefcase? My briefcase? He's trying to get it back? I don't know, I said, but we're going to call the police again and tell them what you saw. I think they ought to check out the passengers on your flight. We walked inside and called the police, and when they arrived, we informed them of what had occurred. They spent 20 minutes checking each car. They explained that they could not investigate, or that they could investigate no more. They did agree to check all the passengers boarding the plane Charlene was to be on. After the police had left, Charlene and I found ourselves standing alone again by the fountain. What were we talking about anyway? She asked, before I saw the man. We were talking about us, I replied. Charlene, why did you think to contact me about this? She gave me a perplexed look. When I was in Peru, the priest was telling me about the manuscript. You kept popping into my mind. Oh, yeah? I didn't think too much about it then, she continued. But later, After I returned to Virginia, every time I would think of the manuscript, I would think of you. I started to call several times, but I always got distracted. Then I received this assignment in Miami that I'm headed to now and discovered, after I had boarded the plane, that I had a layover here. When I landed, I looked up your number. Your answering machine said to contact you at the lake, only in an emergency, but I decided it would be okay to call. I looked at her for a moment, unsure of what to think. Of course, I finally replied. I'm glad you did. I will pass.
Charlene glanced at her watch. It's getting late. I'd better get back to the airport. I'll drive you, I said. We drove to the main terminal and walked toward the embarkation area. I watched carefully for anything unusual. When we arrived, the plane was already boarding, and one of the policemen we had met was observing each passenger. When we approached him, he told us that he had observed everyone scheduled to board, and no one fit the description of the thief. We thanked him, and after he had left, Charlene turned and smiled at me. I guess I'd better go, she said, reaching out to hug my neck. Here are my numbers. Let's keep in touch this time. Listen, I said, I want you to be careful. If you see anything strange, call the police. Don't worry about me, she replied. I'll be fine. For an instant, we looked deeply into each other's eyes. What are you going to do about this manuscript? I asked. I don't know. Listen for news reports about it, I guess. What if it's suppressed? She gave me another of her full smiles. I knew it, she said. You're hooked. I told you you'd love it. What are you going to do? I shrugged. See if I can find out more about it, probably. Good. If you do, let me know. We said goodbye again, and she walked away. I watched as she turned once and waved, then disappeared down the boarding corridor. I walked to my truck and drove back to the lake, stopping only for gas. When I arrived, I walked out to the screened porch and sat on one of the rockers. The evening was loud and crickets and tree frogs, and in the distance I could hear a whippoorwill. Across the lake, the moon had sunk lower in the west and sent a rippled line of reflection toward me on the water surface. The evening had been interesting, but I was still skeptical about the whole idea of a cultural transformation. Like many people, I had been caught up in the social idealism of the 60s and 70s, and even in the spiritual interests of the 80s. But it was hard to judge what was really happening. What kind of new information could possibly alter the entire human world? It all sounded too idealistic and far-fetched. After all, humans had been alive on this planet for a long time. Why would we suddenly gain insight into existence now, at this late date? I gazed out at the water for a few more minutes, then turned off the lights and went into the bedroom to read. The next morning, I awoke suddenly with a dream still fresh in my mind. For a minute or two, I stared at the bedroom ceiling, remembering it fully. I had been making my way through a forest searching for something. The forest was large and exceptionally beautiful. In my quest, I found myself in a number of situations in which I felt totally lost and bewildered, unable to decide how to proceed. Incredibly, at each of these moments, a person would appear out of nowhere, as though by design, to clarify where I needed to go next. I never became aware of the object of my search, but the dream had left me feeling incredibly upbeat and confident. I sat up and noticed a beam of sunlight coming through the window across the room. It sparkled with suspended dust particles. I walked over and pulled back the curtain. The day was radiant. Blue sky, bright sunshine. A stiff breeze gently rocked the trees. The lake would be rippled and glistening this time of day, and the wind chilly against a swimmer's wet skin. I walked outside and dove in. I surfaced and swam out to the middle of the lake, turning on my back to look at the familiar mountains. The lake rested in a deep valley where 3 mountain ridges converged, a perfect lake site discovered by my grandfather in his youth. It had now been 100 years since he had first walked these ridges, a child explorer, a prodigy growing up in a world that was still wild, with cougar and boar and Creek Indians that lived in primitive cabins up the North Ridge. He had sworn at the time that one day he would live in this perfect valley with its massive old trees and 7 springs, and finally he did. Later, to build a lake and a cabin to take countless walks with a young grandson. I never quite understood my grandfather's fascination with this valley, but I had always tried to preserve the land, even when civilization encroached when then surrounded. From the middle of the lake, I could see a particular rock outcropping near the crest of the North Ridge. The day before, in the tradition of my grandfather, I had climbed that overhang, trying to find some peace in the view and in the smells and in the way the wind whirled in the treetops. And as I sat up there, surveying the lake and the dense foliage in the valley below, I had slowly felt better, as if the energy and the perspective were dissolving some block in my mind. A few hours later, I had been talking with Charlene and hearing about the manuscripts. I swam back and pulled myself up on the wooden pier in front of the cabin. I knew all this was too much to believe. I mean, here I was hiding out in these hills, feeling totally disenchanted with my life, when out of the blue, Charlene shows up and explains the cause of my restlessness, quoting some old manuscript that promises the secret of human existence. Yet I also knew that Charlene's arrival was exactly the sort of coincidence of which the manuscript spoke, one that seemed too unlikely to be a mere chance event. Could this ancient document be correct? Have we been slowly building, in spite of our denial and cynicism, a critical mass of people conscious of these coincidences? Were humans now in a position to understand this phenomenon and thus finally to understand the purpose behind life itself? What, I wondered, would this new understanding be? Would the remaining insights in this manuscript tell us, as the priest had said? I faced a decision. Because of the manuscript, I felt a new direction open in my life, a new point of interest. The question was what to do now. I could remain here, or I could find a way to explore further. The issue of danger entered my mind. Who had stolen Charlene's briefcase? Was someone working to suppress the manuscript? How could I know? I thought about the possible risk for a long time, but finally my mood of optimism prevailed. I decided not to worry. I would be careful and go slowly. I walked inside and called the travel agency with the largest ad in the yellow pages. The agent with whom I spoke said he could indeed arrange a trip in Peru. In fact, by chance, there was a cancellation I could fill, a flight with reservations already confirmed at a hotel in Lima. I would have the whole package at a discount, he said, if I could leave in 3 hours. 3 hours?
Oh my God.
And with that, I'll pass. Or what time is it? Should we?
Yeah, it's 7:12 already.
All right.
Wow. I gotta know more already.
You what?
have to know more already.
I know, right? Laura, have you read this book before?
Yeah, it's really kind of funny. My mom was told by a psychic when I was a teenager to read this book, and like how, or it was like a medium, like a psychic medium who like told my mom like how she was supposed to read this book and teach it to others. And so she studied it, and so I grew up with, like reading, being familiar with the Celestine Prophecy and then the following books. And I don't think she ever really taught necessarily others besides at least like me. But but it's really funny because like reading it again, I relate to so much of his story, and just like having like had the knowledge and then got away from it and then coming back and all these like different layers. And I had been thinking about it a while ago, and I was like, oh well, like I've already read the book, I'll just like rewatch the movie. And was thinking, oh, like that'll like catch me up to speed. And now like that I'm actually reading the actual words, it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a totally different experience, and I relate to so much more at such a deeper level. And can I just say how cool it is to be in a meeting with you again, Paul, doing a holy shit. That's really cool.
What's it been? Like 10 years or more?
Over like probably like 15.
Shit.
I mean, we're going to meetings like almost 20 years ago together.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and like all over the valley, and now we're doing virtual.
Oh my God. It's like
Right?
the Celestine Prophecy in real life.
It's really
Right?
weird.
Wow.
And it was so like I was like I saw your thing, and I was And I was like, oh, I should do it, you know, but then I was like half chickening out, and I was like, I don't have the book, but I'm like, but Kindle, you know, and because like I know my mom still has copies, but I don't have them here, and anyways, but I'm just really glad I showed up, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. That's awesome.
I know, it's so fun. Oh my gosh. It's so fantastic, right? It's like one of those things in the brain, like we're reading a book about exactly what's happening right now in real life.
It's really crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love magic. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
Right?
I know magic's my favorite thing.
Yes.
So what is the premise of this book? I mean, is this like, I mean, obviously if your mom was told by a psychic to teach it, like there's some backbone to this book?
Yeah, I mean it has some like really good principles and stuff, and and it's funny because some of them, and I don't remember if it's this book or the next one, but like it talks about like raising children and stuff, and that's really influenced the way I raised my own child, and like keeping the ratio the way it was and everything, like so it's had some like influence there. A lot of the other things like I don't remember as well, so it's really nice diving into it, and like really being able to relate to the restlessness and the short relationships, and I'm like, oh good, this totally justifies my 2 marriages, neither
Right?
lasting here.
Oh, I know. I was just like reflecting on that also when they were talking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, it has been nothing but like short relationships. My marriage was the longest one. We were together for 10 years, but
That's awesome.
other than that, like, I mean, we that ended like 10 years ago, you know? So, um, but then like also like zooming out though, because he always says like we're still in a relationship, it just looks different, you know? And so, but yeah, for those like romantic, intimate relationships, I haven't had like anything super long term, right? And that restlessness and reading it now, I haven't read it in a few years.
Yeah.
It's been quite some time, and to read it from this perspective and remembering where I was at when I originally read it, and I was like, and I'm still
Yeah.
like that, but it's like I'm at a different I'm at different insights.
Yeah.
Like I when I first started reading this, it's like I was just like coming on to the first insight in my life, you know? And then now I feel like I'm closing in on coming into Shambhala here, you know? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wild to see like how it just kind of infiltrated my life and just is so neat to read it right now.
And it's so cool. Like I've been wanting to do like a book study for such a long time. So like this is really cool. Like I'm totally nerding out. So thank you guys for
Yes.
like and providing the space. So yay.
Oh, thank you for coming. This is such a treat, such a
I'll,
gift. It's
I'll send
exciting.
you an invite to the Sacred Wild.
Yes, please.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's a community, and it's funny
Okay.
because I was like, oh, your mom was teaching this, and like again, like taking back, it's like it's kind of the space that I've created, the Sacred Wilds is a community that's based on integration, like a place to where we get to integrate the ceremony right into our day to day, where we get to integrate the festival into the day to day, into the mundane, and then we integrate the sacred into the profane. So instead of going to all these things, going to these ceremonies and these retreats and these festivals and these workshops and all these things to get away from our day to day life. Instead, we go to these things to bring it back and amplify our day to day life. So we no longer have a life that we need an escape from. We no longer have a life we need a vacation from. Like we are living the vacation. And then when we go to these things, it's to amplify the amazingness that's already here, right?
You are speaking my language. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
1003, right?
What?
003.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, no, I firmly like well, I have shaped my lifestyle to be that, like
Mhm.
every day is a ceremony,
Yeah.
and having those rituals and those practices. And then what's beautiful is how it layers and develops and changes as I layer, develop, and change.
Yes, or unlayer, or
Yes, yes.
like both ways. We are
Yeah.
like simultaneously becoming and unbecoming at the same time.
Yes, and so it's really beautiful to find other people who are building and wanting that type of community too, because it's what I've been looking for, without having to do the $2,000 retreats and the,
Yes.
I can't live that
Oh, I feel you
lifestyle,
so
but
much. One of my teachers, she says, we create collectives to heal the collective.
yeah.
And so that like it's true, like this collective sprung from the different collectives that I'm a part of. And so like the way I see it is that it's like these interlinking circles, and eventually these collectives, right?
Yeah.
Spring out, somebody that's in a collective will create another one, and then another one, and then another one. And so we just cover the entire planet, and eventually raising the vibration and creating the change there. I was thinking about it the other day or yesterday, I don't know. Whereas like because I've been so excited for this book, and I was like, you know, the work that we're doing, just because we're not in the spotlight, just because we're not, big and famous, like we're going to a concert, it gosh, that's in like a week and a half or something like that, 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's like a week and a half.
Wow. And with a band named Satsang, and that band's like been in my life for many years, and just like one of the very first bands that came into my life when I was transitioning outside of the mainstream music.
Mm,
And but they're so deep and so impactful in my life, and so many people in the people who live in our way of being know them. I forget that they're a small band, and like they're only $22. What?
yeah.
Because to me, the work that they're doing is so impactful and expansive and so important that they are like that. And so I see us, like the people gathering in these connections, in these containers, in these communities, as like the weavers of the energetic framework of this world. And then you have the people that, like that are in the government, that are in the, in the spotlights. You have the Jim Carreys,
Yeah.
right? That are using the platform that they have to speak truth, to highlight it, to bring it into awareness. And then we are the ones that are like leaving the foundation, right? The energetic foundation for that to happen. So it's like we're working together in these different places. Um, yeah, sorry, it's
Yeah.
totally geeking out. I
No,
love it.
no, I firmly believe that and everything. It's like kind of like today I was almost late to an appointment because I work at the district office for Mesa Public Schools, and there was a principal that got reassigned to the district office because of personal reasons. But I knew her as like I know her personally, and so I went to kind of just like say hi and everything, and it was just asking about how she's doing, and then like next thing I know, she's having this meltdown, and I was just kind of like and I was able to just kind of like, have you thought about Reiki? Have you heard of it? And she was like, my dentist was telling me about it this morning. And I'm like,
Yes.
okay, I'm gonna leave you my card and we're gonna connect. And
Uh-huh.
she was like, yeah, I was wondering if I needed counseling. And she's like, but maybe I just need to connect with myself. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
and it's like that type of ripple effect is just like
Mm-hmm.
I love it, and it's just so beautiful. You guys are creating that. I love it. Oh,
Yes. And then you get to co-create with us, because that's what it is. Like it's a co-creation.
that's awesome.
It's, there is no hierarchy, there is no authority, there is no anything. Like
Mm.
we're all in this together, co-creating, weaving, being, learning, growing, expanding, releasing, all of it. And in the community, there is a place for you to write about and offer whatever services you offer. So anything that you offer, whether it's Reiki, whether it's coaching, whether it's a community of your own, whether it's anything, like there's spaces there for you to promote that, to share that, to amplify that.
That's
And
awesome.
so,
Yeah, because I've really been wanting to, I used to offer a community mandala meditation class when the Soul Center was in downtown Mesa, and I haven't had a venue for it since, but it's been something I've had my eyes open for, looking for an opportunity. So that was.
oh yeah, let's connect. Paul, give her my number. Thank you. Yeah, let's connect because I want to, like, I have the offerings, the online offerings, Zoom offerings, but I also want to do in-person offerings as well. And so yeah, let's talk and we can talk about what that looks like and everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've been putting together like course material and stuff, and so I run Canvas with the learning management system. Like it's they use it at all the universities and stuff now, but
Okay.
they have it at the schools. So I admit I'm the administrator of it for Mesa, so I use it every day. So like I was making a sacred geometry Canvas course and
Yeah.
stuff. It's all digital with all the resources and everything
Oh
like
my God,
easy
yes.
to share and like things, and it's all on the free for teacher side. So it's like really cool to be able to like I'll have to you'll love how that stuff. It's really cool, like the things you can do.
Oh, that's exciting. I know. So that's eventually the goal for the Sacred Wild. So my vision starting next year is that the Sacred Wild's going to turn into a mystery school. And
Oh,
so it's going to be like everybody who's joining now gets maintains access for free for life.
uh,
But once I get all the course content created and everything, it's going to be just an infinite mystery school that goes over. It's going to be like this 7 month long coursework. And every week there's new topics and new courses, and then it'll repeat. And we get to delve deeper into, right, like the spiral. And
that's really
so yeah, mystery school, meaning like we ask the questions that can never be answered. We contemplate and explore those questions, yet there's never any answers. It's a mystery. We're exploring the mystery. So yeah, this is gonna be. I'm so glad you're here, Laura.
Yeah.
That is so perfect. So, so
so
Paul, this is your first experience ever with the Celestine Prophecy, and
Yeah.
it's already like bringing magic, right?
Right. At
Wow.
our fingertips, it's right here in front of us.
Mm-hmm. I know. I know. What are your thoughts, if any?
Well, my first thoughts were what backing does this have? Is there has any more been found, or is this just some imaginary story, just a fictional story? That's my first. I'm gonna do some digging. And you mentioned a movie. I'll probably watch the movie tonight. But
Yeah.
like the concept of reality here, where is this book come from? Is this something that was prophesied, or is this something that was just out of this one dude's head?
I find it fascinating that it's located in Peru,
Right.
which is where the Shipibo shamans were and where ayahuasca was initially created by those shamans.
Right.
And
yeah.
so
Which is
I find,
also where I thought you went, Laura, but that's where it was. Peru.
Yeah, I did. My sister-in-law is from Peru, and so we went there for the wedding and everything.
That's when we lost contact, Jen. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she was moving to Peru. I remember sitting in an apartment hanging out with you, and you were supposed to be leaving and going there to teach. That's the last time I heard from you until last week.
Yeah, but yeah, and like my brother and his wife have two beautiful boys now. And we both have raised our kids bilingual in the dual language schools and stuff. And
Mm.
he's got a place in Peru, and they go there and rent it, like, like every year they try to, and then her parents are always coming here, so that's a really cool connection for me. But when I did some digging not too long ago after I read the movie, I read the movie, no, I watched the movie again. Uh, uh, it my impression was that he kind of prophesized it, that it, or I don't know if it's necessarily strongly based on anything, but I think that there is lots of truth in it. And I think that the movie really falls flat. But watch it, and then go deep with the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's
know the movie is its own thing. It doesn't remotely compare to the book, but still, like, for the people who don't want to read, then you're like, okay, well, there's a movie, watch the movie, and then come back to me, you know.
yeah.
But I used to, like, I was always able to find this book in dollar stores. I could pick it up for $1 or $2 at
Yeah,
changing
that's how I got it.
hands
Was that like
or
a
half price.
yeah.
Yeah. And I would always, always, always keep multiple copies on me. And I would always have copies with me in my car
Wow.
because I would give it out to people like all the time. Anybody who remotely had, like, I could feel that energy, right? Like that curiosity, that inspiration. And so I would always have so many different copies on hand. So, like, there's is I think I'm missing like two out of the series, but then there's other copies where I have multiples that I found, and it's just, yeah, it was one of those easy to read books, yet super profound.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if it wasn't like semi channeled in a way.
Yeah.
Divinely
I,
inspired.
I definitely could see that it was, and I definitely think that one part that, now that you say everything, I think I finally understand that they probably were doing ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
I'm
That's where I'm, because, like, on the other side, so I work with psychedelics in a ceremonial
okay.
setting. I facilitate ceremonies using that as medicine.
Okay,
And on the other side of it, right? Because I haven't read this since I began my journey with psychedelics.
that's really cool to
And
be
so
reading again with your
thinking,
perspective.
yeah, so thinking back, right? And it's funny because I'm going through, so I've started fasting once a month, and that's been super deep medicine for me and holds a very similar path as medicine journeys. Have you worked with any psychedelics before?
I haven't personally. My mom's done a couple ayahuasca ceremonies, and
Mm-hmm.
like I've done some like stupid got slip mushroom stuff, and like, but not like a
Not like in a ceremonial.
not an int I have not had an intentional experience.
Okay.
So it's something I would be open to with the right setting and everything like
Of
that.
course.
But not having encountered that, I have no experience.
So, like, what the connections that I'm making right now is just like the insights seem like the different, because, like, going through the medicine journey, I feel like there's different gateways or veils, that thresholds that you go through, right?
Yeah.
As you journey deeper into the medicine.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing it's the same way, it's same thing for fasting with me also, right? I have my resistance. I went in with this fast thinking like, oh, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be easy. My last fast was amazing. And this fast is like knocking me down on my hands and knees, like, holy shit, it's
Wow.
fucking hard. And it's the same thing with medicine ceremonies. And but like the insights, the progression of them feel very similar to a medicine journey, and then ending with Shambhala, right?
Yeah.
That's the medicine space. That's the shamanic realm that you can get to in a medicine journey, or I get there in meditation also. I can get there, like, but that's what Shambhala. So like connecting those dots, I'm like, oh my gosh.
So can I tell you, like, I have been strongly like pulled towards like shamanic work and stuff lately, and like this is the book I've been reading, the Shamanic Rate
Yeah.
Drumming, and it's like so like my
Yeah. So
It's
what
all coming together.
yeah, and so like that's the type of work that I do with I call it the medicine, and I use psilocybin mushrooms
uh-huh.
mainly, but I've also used MDMA and ketamine, or a couple of other things. LSD is actually, I it was funny because I was listening to I have this new book that is just the immortality key,
Uh-huh.
and holy moly, blowing my mind. Anyway, realizing that LSD is a plant medicine. Well,
Awesome.
not necessarily
Yeah.
plant, but it's natural. It's made from
Yeah.
ergot, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's a fungus nonetheless. It's
Yeah.
a plant medicine.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay, I get it, because I never felt the way that, like, when I work with MDMA and ketamine, I afterwards I'm like, ugh, right?
Yeah.
It's like gross and whatever. But with LSD, I never felt that way. So that makes sense. Anywho, but that's the work, right? It's like we're alchemizing these. And like when he mentioned, like, I still don't understand how people can get over like the traumas or the abuse or their life experience. Like, that's been my life's
Mhm.
work, my purpose.
Yeah.
and and so like that's what the intention is. And then to get to the shamanic realms, like, let's sit with the ancestors, let's access those wisdoms. Those aren't gone. It's in a different energetic dimension. And working with the medicine, especially in a group setting, which I'm going to start holding group ceremonies, I'm super excited.
Cool.
We can access those shamanic realms together. We can work together, weave together, alchemize together, and work as a collective. And yeah, just the more I think about it, I'm like, oh my god, it's totally about medicine.
That's
This
really
is totally about a medicine journey. It's crazy.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm super excited. This is gonna be a good read.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm really excited. I'm really glad that it's funny. Like even he's like saying the psilocybin. I had a awesome coffee date with an old friend of mine Friday, and he was talking about it and stuff. And that's we were joking. Came up with the fact that I haven't had any intentional, and it was like in experience and whatnot. But anyway, so that's just all the different funny layers. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful that I didn't click X out of the box too fast. Like,
Yes,
and
I'm so glad you're here.
Well,
uh,
you also want to be aware that this is recorded and it will be on YouTube. Just as
oh,
a,
okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
you're welcome.
And thank you for having me.
Should we make some kind of a announcement when in the beginning, just in case for new people?
We can. Every time somebody comes on, it says that it's recorded.
Okay.
So it'll say that it's this is recorded. But I think mentioning that it is posted on YouTube is probably,
I will add that into the beginning.
yeah,
Gotcha.
awesome.
What a great night. Thank you.
I know, it's fantastic.
And I'll reach out to you tomorrow and we'll connect.
Yes.
I sent both of you each other's numbers. So
Oh, perfect.
Perfect. Thank
Okay.
you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
absolutely.
It was so lovely being with you guys tonight.
Thank you for joining us. For those that are going to be listening online, what a great read. And I look forward to next week. Please join us.